The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Route 66 as a convoy of motorcycles roared past the desert landscape. The Hells Angels Phoenix chapter was making their annual ride to support a children's charity event in Flagstaff. Leather vests, chrome gleaming, engines thundering, they were an imposing sight that made most drivers pull aside nervously. Jake Morrison, the chapter president, led the pack. At 52, his weathered face told stories of a hard life turned around. Behind him rode Marcus "Doc" Henderson, a former Army medic, and Tommy Chen, whose past included time in foster care himself. These weren't just bikers, they were men who understood suffering and had dedicated their lives to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. They stopped at a rundown gas station on the outskirts of Prescott Valley. The place looked forgotten by time, cracked pavement, faded signs, and a building that seemed to sag under the weight of years. While the others stretched their legs and grabbed cold drinks, Jake noticed something odd. A small girl, no older than 7, sat behind the dumpster. Her clothes were filthy, hair matted, and her thin arms wrapped around her knees. But what caught Jake's attention wasn't her appearance, it was her eyes. They held a kind of hollow terror he'd only seen in war zones. Jake approached slowly, crouching down several feet away to not frighten her. The girl flinched anyway. "I'm not going to hurt you, sweetheart. My name is Jake." "What's yours?" The girl stared at him with those haunted eyes but said nothing. Jake noticed fresh bruises on her arms, poorly hidden by dirt. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" Still nothing. But her hands moved slightly, and Jake saw she was clutching something, a piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it was beginning to tear at the creases. Marcus noticed Jake's long absence and walked over. When he saw the girl, his expression immediately shifted to concern. He'd been a medic in Afghanistan and recognized signs of severe trauma when he saw them. "Jake, we need to call someone. Look at her condition." The girl suddenly spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They told me not to tell. They said they'd hurt the others worse." Jake felt his blood run cold. "Others?" The girl's hands trembled as she slowly extended the crumpled paper toward Jake. He took it carefully, unfolding it with growing dread. It was a hand-drawn map, done in crayon with a child's unsteady hand. But despite its crude execution, the details were disturbingly specific. The map showed a property about 15 miles north. A main house, outbuildings, and most chilling of all, a basement marked with an X and the words "locked door" in shaky letters. Surrounding the X were small stick figures, at least a dozen of them. Below the map, in that same childish handwriting, were words that made Jake's stomach turn: "Help US please. They keep US down there. No one knows we are here." By now, several other bikers had gathered around. Tommy looked at the map over Jake's shoulder and his face went white. "Man, this is serious. We need to call the cops right now." Jake pulled out his phone, but the girl suddenly grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "No police. They have someone inside. That's what Mr. Garrett said. He said the police won't help, that nobody cares about kids like us." "Who's Mr. Garrett?" Marcus asked gently. The girl's eyes welled with tears. "He's the one who took me. Took all of us. We were at different places, shelters, foster homes, the street. He said he was giving us a better life. But the basement." Her voice broke. "The basement is cold and dark and there's never enough food and sometimes kids disappear and never come back." Jake's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He looked at his brothers, every face showed the same burning anger mixed with determination. These were men who had spent years trying to prove that beneath the leather and tattoos, they were forces for good. This was their moment. "How did you get away?" Jake asked. The girl wiped her nose on her sleeve. "There was a delivery today. Food and supplies. When the man came down to the basement door, I was supposed to carry boxes up the stairs. The outside door was open for just a minute. I ran. I ran so fast. But I can't leave them there. My friend Sarah, she's only 5. And there's a baby. A real baby that cries all night. Jake stood up, his mind already forming a plan. He turned to Marcus. Get on the phone with our contacts at the FBI field office in Phoenix. Not local PD, straight to the feds. Tell them we have a credible child trafficking situation and we're going in. Tommy objected. Jake, we can't just storm a place. We need to wait for authorities. Jake looked back at the girl, then at the map in his hands. How many kids do you think are suffering in that basement right now while we wait for bureaucracy? We're going to that location. We're going to secure those children. And if anyone tries to stop us, they're going to learn why you don't mess with the Hell's Angels when kids are in danger. The girl looked up at Jake with something like hope flickering in those dead eyes. You're really going to help us? Jake knelt down again and looked her directly in the eye. I promise you, sweetheart, before this sun sets, every child in that basement is going to be free. Within 20 minutes, Jake had mobilized every resource at his disposal. Marcus reached Special Agent Victoria Chin at the FBI Phoenix office, a woman who had worked with the Hells Angels on previous cases involving exploited children. She listened to the situation and made a decision that would save precious time. We're sending a tactical team, but they're 40 minutes out from your location. Agent Chin, I need you to understand something. If we wait and something happens to those kids because we followed protocol, I'll never forgive myself. There was a long pause on the line. Chen knew Jake's history. She knew these men had pulled abused kids from dangerous situations before, always managing to stay just on the right side of the law. Do not engage any suspects. Visual confirmation only. Keep those kids safe until we arrive. And Morrison, if you compromise my case, I'll have your entire chapter arrested. Jake agreed, but both of them knew the truth. If those children were in immediate danger, protocol would go out the window. The convoy of motorcycles headed north, following the crude map. The little girl, who finally whispered her name was Emma, rode in the support van with 2 of the female club associates who had joined them. She guided them turn by turn through increasingly remote desert roads. The property appeared exactly as Emma had drawn it, an isolated compound surrounded by chain-link fence. From their position on a ridge overlooking the site, Jake surveyed the scene through binoculars. The main house looked ordinary enough, but something felt deeply wrong. Windows were covered with heavy curtains despite the blazing afternoon heat. Security cameras dotted the perimeter. A black SUV sat in the driveway. Tommy pointed to a ventilation shaft barely visible near the foundation. That's got to be for the basement. Emma said they kept it cold down there. In this heat, you'd need serious ventilation for an underground space. Marcus was monitoring police scanners. Nothing unusual being reported in this area. No missing children alerts that match what Emma described. It's like these kids just vanished and nobody noticed. That's the point, Jake said grimly. These predators are smart. They take the invisible ones. Foster kids who bounce between homes. Runaways who have no family looking for them. Children from homeless encampments. Society's forgotten. Movement near the house caught Jake's attention. A man emerged, tall, well-dressed, completely ordinary looking. He carried garbage bags to a burn barrel and casually set them on fire. The normalcy of the action contrasted sickeningly with what Jake knew was happening beneath that house. Then Jake saw something that made his decision for him. A small hand pressed against a basement window, just for a second, before being yanked back. The window was at ground level, partially obscured by overgrown weeds. But Jake had seen it. More importantly, he'd seen the terror in that brief glimpse. He turned to his crew. We're not waiting. Those kids are signaling for help right now. Jake divided his crew into 3 teams. Marcus would take 5 members to cover the back exits. Tommy and his group would secure the perimeter and watch for any vehicles attempting to flee. Jake would lead the main team directly to the basement entrance. But before they moved, Jake made a call that would change everything. He dialed a number he had sworn never to use again, Detective Raymond Cooper, Prescott Valley PD. Cooper had arrested Jake 15 years ago for assault. But that arrest had been the turning point that led Jake to turn his life around. The two men had developed a strange respect for each other over the years. Cooper, this is Morrison. I need you to listen without interrupting. Jake laid out the entire situation in 90 seconds. There was silence on the other end, then Cooper's gruff voice. You're telling me there's a trafficking operation in my jurisdiction and the feds are handling it? Jake heard the anger in Cooper's tone, not at him, but at the situation. We've got maybe 15 minutes before the FBI arrives. But Cooper, there are children in a locked basement right now. I saw a hand at the window. They're signaling for help. Give me the address. I'm 10 minutes out. Morrison, if you're lying to me. I'm not. And Cooper? Bring bolt cutters. Heavy ones. As Jake ended the call, he looked at his assembled crew. 170 Hells Angels had converged on this location, some from neighboring chapters who had heard the call and rode hard to get there. It was the largest mobilization the Arizona chapters had ever coordinated outside of their annual charity runs. The sight was formidable. Motorcycles lined the desert road. Men and women in leather, many with military backgrounds, all united by a single purpose. If you're watching this story and your heart is breaking for these children like ours is, take a moment right now and subscribe to this channel. Because what happens next proves that sometimes heroes don't wear badges, they wear leather and ride steel horses. The real fight is just beginning. Jake gave the signal and the teams moved into position with military precision. As they approached the compound, the man who had been burning trash spotted them. His face went from confusion to panic in seconds. He ran toward the house, fumbling for his phone. Marcus cut him off before he reached the door, tackling him to the ground. The man struggled, screaming about lawsuits and illegal entry, but his words died when Jake showed him the map. A little girl drew this while she was probably starving in your basement. You're done. More men emerged from the house, 3 of them, all looking like they had just woken up. One reached for a weapon but froze when he saw the sheer number of bikers surrounding the property. They were outnumbered 50 to 1. Tommy zip-tied all 4 men as Detective Cooper's patrol car came screaming up the driveway, followed by 2 more units. Cooper took one look at the scene and made a decision that would define his career. Morrison, show me that basement. Now. The basement door was reinforced steel with 3 separate locks. Cooper's bolt cutters were useless against it. One of the detained men laughed bitterly. You'll never get through that. It's designed to withstand battering rams. Jake turned to his crew. Tommy, Marcus, get the hydraulic rescue tools from the truck. We didn't spend 5 years volunteering with the fire department for nothing. While they retrieved the equipment, Emma approached the basement door and pressed her small hand against it. She began speaking softly. Sarah, it's Emma. I came back. I brought help. Real help this time. From behind the steel, a tiny voice responded. Emma? They said you were dead. They said if we tried to run, we'd end up like you. I'm alive. And you're all going to be free. I promise. The sound of children crying filtered through the door, not just 1 or 2, but many. The bikers exchanged grim looks. This was worse than they had imagined. The hydraulic spreader made quick work of the lock mechanisms. As the door finally gave way, a wave of stench hit them, unwashed bodies, human waste, fear. Cooper gagged but pushed forward. The basement was vast, stretching under most of the house. What they found would haunt every person there for the rest of their lives. 17 children ranging from ages 3 to 14 were huddled in the darkness. Most were chained to pipes along the wall with just enough length to reach filthy mattresses on the floor. Their clothes were rags. Many showed signs of malnutrition and abuse. In the corner, a teenage girl no older than 16 clutched an infant to her chest. "Sweet Jesus," Cooper whispered, his hardened cop exterior cracking. Marcus immediately shifted into medic mode, moving among the children with gentle efficiency. He called out assessments. Severe dehydration here. Possible broken arm. This one needs immediate hospital transport. Jake knelt beside the teenage girl with the baby. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Melissa." Her voice was raw from disuse. "This is Jonah. He's 4 months old. His mother died during childbirth down here. They just left her body for 2 days before taking it away." Jake's hands trembled with rage, but he kept his voice steady. "You protected him. You kept him alive. You're a hero, Melissa." The FBI tactical team arrived, followed by ambulances and child protective services. Agent Chin surveyed the scene with professional horror. "In 20 years with the Bureau, I've never seen anything this extensive. Morrison, you and your crew just broke open one of the largest child trafficking operations in Arizona history." But the real moment came when Emma was reunited with her friend Sarah. The 5-year-old flew into Emma's arms, both girls sobbing. "You came back. You really came back. I told you I would." Emma held her friend tight. "I told you someone would care." Cooper stood beside Jake as paramedics loaded children into ambulances. "You did good today, Morrison. Real good." Jake watched each child being brought into the sunlight, many seeing sky for the first time in months or even years. "This is just the beginning, Cooper. We need to find out how many other places like this exist." The investigation that followed Emma's rescue operation became known as Operation Desert Guardian. Federal agents discovered that the Prescott Valley compound was part of a network spanning 5 states. The man Jake had first confronted, identified as Leonard Garrett, had been operating for over a decade with disturbing sophistication. Garrett's system was methodical and evil in its efficiency. He specifically targeted children who had fallen through society's cracks, kids aging out of foster care, runaways from abusive homes, children of undocumented immigrants too afraid to report them missing. He maintained falsified records that made it appear some children had been legally transferred to relatives or group homes in other states. The paper trail was so convincing that caseworkers never followed up. But Emma's courage had shattered his entire operation. During the trials, 17 children testified. Each one spoke of the darkness, the hunger of the fear, but also of how they had clung to hope because of Emma's promise that she would bring help. The prosecutors built an ironclad case. Garrett and his 4 accomplices received life sentences without possibility of parole. The Hells Angels Phoenix chapter became unlikely heroes in the national media. Jake Morrison appeared on news programs across the country, his weathered face and leather vest contrasting sharply with polished news anchors. But his message remained consistent. "We didn't do anything special. We just refused to look away when a child needed help. Every adult has that same responsibility." The publicity brought unexpected consequences, positive ones. Tips flooded into the FBI about suspected trafficking operations. The Hells Angels established a formal partnership with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Chapters across the country began organizing patrols in high-risk areas, using their intimidating presence to protect vulnerable youth. Marcus "Doc" Henderson used his medical expertise to create trauma-informed care protocols specifically for rescued trafficking victims. His program was adopted by children's hospitals nationwide. Tommy Chen opened a safe house in Phoenix specifically for children rescued from trafficking situations. He called it Emma's Place. The facility provided long-term care, therapy, education, and most importantly, the security and love these children had been denied. Detective Cooper received a commendation for his rapid response and became a vocal advocate for reforming how missing children cases were handled. He worked with state legislators to pass Emma's Law, requiring more rigorous tracking of children in state custody and mandatory follow-ups when children were transferred between facilities. The 17 children faced long roads to recovery. Some were reunited with family members who had never stopped searching. Others found loving foster and adoptive homes. A few remained at Emma's place, building new lives with the support of people who genuinely cared. Melissa, the teenage girl who had protected baby Jonah in the basement, was granted legal guardianship of the infant after his mother's family could not be located. She enrolled in community college while living in subsidized housing, determined to give Jonah the childhood they had both been denied. And Emma, the 7-year-old girl whose hand-drawn map had started it all, found something she had never known in her short, traumatic life. She found a family. 3 years later, the Arizona desert bloomed with unexpected color as the Hells Angels Phoenix chapter held their annual charity ride. But this year was special. It marked the 3rd anniversary of Operation Desert Guardian. Jake Morrison stood in the parking lot of Emma's place, now a thriving facility housing 23 children. The building had expanded twice since opening, funded by donations that poured in from across the nation after Emma's story went viral. A young girl, now 10 years old, ran toward him with a wide smile. Her blonde hair was clean and shining, pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans, a purple t-shirt, and sneakers that lit up when she walked. This was Emma, transformed, thriving, and more importantly, genuinely happy. "Jake. You made it." She crashed into him with a hug that nearly knocked him over despite his size. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo. How's school?" "I got straight A's again. And guess what? Mrs. Patterson says I'm good enough to enter the state art competition." Emma's eyes sparkled with pride and excitement, emotions that had been completely absent 3 years ago. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's amazing, Emma. Your mom and dad must be so proud." Emma's adoptive parents, Richard and Susan Chen, Tommy's older brother and sister-in-law, approached with warm smiles. They had been the first to step forward when Emma needed a permanent home, and the match had been perfect. "She talks about that art competition constantly," Richard laughed. "Our refrigerator looks like a gallery." Susan put her arm around Emma. "We're the lucky ones. She's brought so much joy into our lives." The charity ride kicked off with over 300 motorcycles, nearly double the number from 3 years ago. The event had become legendary, drawing bikers from across the country. They rode to raise funds for trafficking prevention, survivor support, and legislative reform. But the most powerful moment came during the closing ceremony. All 17 children who had been rescued from that basement stood on stage together. Some were now in college. Others had graduated high school. Little Sarah, now 8, stood beside Emma holding her hand. Melissa walked to the microphone, baby Jonah, now a rambunctious 3-year-old, on her hip. She had just completed her nursing degree and been hired at Phoenix Children's Hospital. 3 years ago, we were invisible. Society had forgotten we existed. But one little girl refused to give up, and one group of bikers refused to look away. Her voice was strong and clear. "To Jake, Marcus, Tommy, Detective Cooper, and every single person who fought for us, thank you. You didn't just save our lives. You showed us that we matter. That we're worth fighting for." The crowd erupted in applause. Emma stood beside Jake, her small hand in his large, scarred one. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. Jake knelt down to her level, his eyes glistening. "Thank you for being brave enough to draw that map, Emma. You saved yourself and 16 other kids. Never forget that." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, motorcycles lined up for the ride home. Their engines roared in unison, a thunderous reminder that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who simply refuse to ignore a child's cry for help.